Offering our most prayerful salutations at Swami's lotus feet, respected elders, brothers, sisters, and children. It's such a beautiful evening again to be in the satsang of Swami, his life, his message, his teachings, and our own relationship to him, which will come out in different forms in this presentation. But I kind of wanted to sort of focus on the path of devotion for our spiritual journey. The intent of this conversation is more for us to look at our own life, our own journey to him. I think each of us came with either through the family, or through an experience, or through friends who brought us to Sai centers, or very many different ways, or Swami himself revealing his presence to us in some other form to pull us closer to him. And each of this is so beautiful because this is what makes this relationship, which we call as devotion, takes so many different names and forms, as you will see as I go along here. So before we delve a little bit deeper into this topic, just wanted to remind ourselves of this letter of Swami, which was written way back in 1947. He was hardly 21 years old, hardly, and wrote this actually a more expansive letter to his brother. And of course, this is one part of that letter. And at a time when, Swami's mission was slowly taking off in 1940 was when he, personally left the precincts of his home, and then slowly, step by step, spread his message of love and peace to everybody. So in this letter, Swami writes in this particular paragraph, I have a task to foster all mankind and ensure for all of them lives filled with ananda. I have a vow to lead all who stray away from the straight path again into goodness and save them. I am attached to a work that I love, to remove the sufferings of the poor and grant them what they lack. I have a reason to be happy, for I rescue all who worship and adore me. I have my definition of devotion. I expect those devoted to me to have to treat joy and grief, gain and loss with equal fortitude. This also means that I will never give up those who attach themselves to me. This is again a beautiful letter which I go back to very, very often because it pretty much is the blueprint of Swami's mission. And way back in 1947, Swami said this, and obviously he lived many, many years till 2011, embodying this mission of his. And in every case, you see, he lived up to what he determined was the mission for this avatar. The same note, another letter which I go to pretty often, and oftentimes when there are several things in our own lives, either with the family or with the work we go through, or with the Sai centers or the organization which we are part of, often enough, we come into situations where there are questions in our own mind. There are questions in our own relationships with Swami. We try to sort of reiterate for ourselves in terms of who he is, what he means to us. Some of us have had the personal opportunity to be in his presence. Some of us have connected to him through letters, dreams, or through people who have had association with him. But in every case, at the end, the relationship is only ours and his, right? There is no second person. I always remind myself, not even the spouse or the children come in between our relationship with Swami. So again, a letter in that context. Swami has written several of these letters to devotees over a period of time. And in many cases, the letters, there may be some personal references to a few things in their own family and otherwise, but typically the content is always spiritual. And that is the mark of a master, right? In the end, we need to live in the world, but at the same time, our connection to him or our purpose in life is always to connect back to the source. So in this, Swami says, this is written in 1973, have you got any spiritual hunger? Spiritual hunger is the ultimate meaning of every activity in life. The dissatisfaction and the restlessness that remain even after obtaining all the necessities of life show that everyone, consciously or unconsciously, does suffer from spiritual hunger. And it is not appeased until the spirit within is realized. Without this divine discontent, there is no real progress. World peace is possible when all the people of the world wake up to the facts governing universal life, and when there is a heart-to-heart feeling of goodness, love, and oneness amongst the inhabitants of the world. Again, a reassurance for us to always understand why we are in the spiritual path. No matter after satisfying all the physical needs of a good job, a good family, good children, a good life, even then, at the end of it, there is always some discontent. That's what Swami is pointing out here. And that discontent is what leads us to the spiritual life. And that is what allows us to realize the purpose of our life. So it's very important that that discontent is felt within. And it's not a negative feeling, actually. It is a feeling which takes us, actually, Swami says, without this discontent, there is no real progress. So in fact, that is so essential for us. And seemingly when there are situations which are beyond our control, it is very, very important to sort of connect back to Swami, connect back to that feeling of goodness, love, and oneness. And being a true devotee of Swami, I think Swami again has, we'll see a little bit later in the presentation, Swami has given qualities that he expects of us, of having come to him. And if we exhibit those qualities, then we are allowing for this greater unity of the entire world. On that note, let me read one more quote and then we'll go to a personal story here. Devotion cannot be confined to observances like worship, pilgrimages, or going to temples. These are merely actions indicative of devotion. There is a power which provides a basic impulse for these actions. That is the love of God. Bhakti means paripurna prema, or total love. This love is motiveless. Love based on a motive cannot be real love. As a river seeks to join the ocean by a natural impulse, as a creeper winds itself naturally around a tree to climb upwards, the devotee's love is a spontaneous expression of the yearning to realize God, free from worldly desires of any kind. So again, what we see is the basis of this bhakti or devotion is that true love, that universal love, that love for God. On that note, some of you may have heard me share this story before, but every time I share this story of my own coming to Swami, I get a different perspective for myself. And yesterday I listened to Brother Satyajit speak in Region 2. They had a session, and he was always talking about, he brought up this point of points of view, right? When there is a situation, when there is an experience, there is a listener's point of view, there is an experiencer's point of view. And in this case, if you consider this as, this is me in the picture in front of Swami in Sundaram. And there is, the individual's point of view experiencing it. Of course, there is Swami's point of view. So he was explaining yesterday nicely that every time we hear a story, it's important to look at it from all different perspectives. And every time there is a new lesson and a new learning. So I have shared this experience several times before, but when I was sort of thinking through the presentation for this evening, I just thought of this experience one more time, because in my own journey of this connection to Swami came through the Balvikas program. And growing up, my family was already into Swami even before my birth. And so coming into Swami's fold was quite natural, in the sense that Swami's picture was always the center of our altar at home. And he's the one we worshipped always. And, he's the one we always knew as this divine being who is, incarnated amidst us. And so I was in the Balvikas program. And of course, this was an opportunity where I got to give this welcome speech in Swami's presence. And this is in Sundaram. I know there are several of you on the call who have, had the opportunity to be in Chennai and in Sundaram. A beautiful place where, Swami's love is felt. And, on a weekly basis, there are bhajans even today, which happen in Sundaram. And this particular experience was where I, gave this welcome speech. And, Swami got up from his chair and, came and stood in front of me and, started looking into my eyes to see whether, I'm continuing to speak. And, I always share this piece where I was quite scared and, being in the presence of the avatar like that, I immediately turned my eyes and I looked elsewhere and, the speech which I had prepared, I just went through it. And Swami stared at me for the entire time. And, at the end, we had this, I've completed the talk and it was a very blissful moment. But when I think back on this incident today, there are many, many facets to this incident. In fact, at the end of it, Swami said to me something in Telugu. At that time, I didn't even understand Telugu. And, it was later on, many years later, he had revealed to me that what I said was, you come and join my school. And that is how you came and joined. So many things in life, which we think is our own personal choice. And to many, many levels, it is already predestined. And particularly, our connection to Swami is something which, Swami will, the moment we take that one step, he will take that 10 towards us to make sure that that bond and that connection stays even more stronger. So the reason I brought up this incident today was, I was thinking in my own life, the connection to Swami was through that Balvikas program, through SSC, as we call it here, and through that step-by-step interaction with Swami. He kept it very personal. So I was thinking about this whole concept of devotion. How does it start? And, in my case, it was, going to this class on a weekly basis, being part of the center, singing bhajans. These are all, different types of activities which we go through. But at the end, at the back of our mind, it's very important to keep that in mind that each of us, through all these different paths, are developing this personal relationship with Swami. So this was, at a very physical level, Swami has mundane conversations, and I'm sure you've heard several students and other devotees share over a period of time. Swami's, the relationship always starts at a very, very physical level. Swami will ask questions of what's your name, where do you come from? In this case, he asked me, how many days did you practice the speech? And I gave a particular answer. And, he keeps it so comfortable. And I think Swami is such a beautiful example, even if you say he's God and he's this avatar, even at a very personal level, he makes the person he's speaking to very comfortable. He comes to their level, he comes to their, things that they are going through, a child, whatever he's going through at that point in time, and, school and food and, all the different topics he used to talk to us as students. So this is how one by one, I was thinking in my own life, through these classes, through these interactions, little by little, Swami was getting to this, personalized form in my own life. Obviously, Swami was physically present at that point in time. So it was the access to that physical form was much easier. But at the same time, Swami's connection to us has in no way diminished, even after he's left his physical form. Even today, he connects to us, in fact, that dichotomy of, his physical presence is no longer there. I think we just have to think about him and, in our own altars, and he's present there to answer any question we have. So to that point, I was thinking this whole relationship with Swami, how does this develop? So in the beginning, there is, this is a cycle, but maybe I'll start here right at the top. In the beginning, there is some amount of interest, in trying to understand who he is. We get to hear about Swami from somebody. We get to try to learn a little bit more about him. At that point, we try to pick up a book, try to understand a little bit more about Swami, try to hear more stories. Then slowly you build this, trusting relationship with him. Slowly you start putting certain, burdens on Swami, if you will, worldly burdens on Swami. In turn, he will give us an experience. In turn, he makes it lighter for us to go through certain situations in life. Slowly you build trust in this relationship. Then next step in that is, then there is faith, right? Slowly you start to develop this point of, he knows what is best for me. He knows what is best for us. Step by step, we get into that mode where we no longer slowly stop questioning what goes through in our own life, but truly believe that he's put us exactly where we need to be at that point in time to experience whatever is going through, because it is in our best interest. And he knows best, right? In the end, that is what true faith is. And the next step becomes acceptance. Acceptance sometimes has a negative tone to it, right? Where, it always appears as if something negative happens, I have to accept. But something positive happens as well, we accept, right? But we think about it a little bit more, when we go through hardships. That is where we often hear the story of, Kunti in the Mahabharata, the mother of the Pandavas. If you look at her life, she has always experienced pain, right? Even just to recap, for many of you may know the story, but Kunti was born into a very kingly. Her own father was a king, and she was in this situation where she happened to be blessed by the boon of a rishi, and in the process of testing it out, she ends up with a child prior to her marriage, and that is Karna. And then eventually, she has to give up that baby. So, and then she gets married to King Pandu, and then, the story, the Pandavas are, exiled early on. King Pandu goes off into the forest with Madri and Kunti, his two wives, and, the children, the Pandavas are born in the forest itself. Again, seemingly difficult life for somebody who's entirely lived her life in the palace, goes through an exile and, living a difficult life. And then in the forest loses her husband. Pandu passes away and Madri passes away. And then all the 5 children become her responsibility. And then she comes back to the palace and then notices all the difficulties which, the relationship of the Pandavas and Kauravas. And often enough, there is conflict. And she lives to see every conflict happening, and Yudhishthira losing the game of dice. Again, the Pandavas exiled into the forest. So it's just interesting. And, of course, at that point in time, Kunti stays back, for one part of the exile, she is with the Pandavas, and then one part of it, she stays back in the palace itself. And it's just interesting that at no phase of her life you see happiness. And Swami often used to point out that she prayed to Krishna, give me difficulties. And the reason she prayed for that is only in difficulties we think about him much more. Anyway, so that was my long preamble to that acceptance. And then, of course, gratitude. Gratitude is another important aspect of this relationship with Swami. And then, of course, surrender. But often enough, important thing to think about is love is the basis of all these different qualities. And I also want to say that the devotion is nothing but synonymous with the word love. Devotion, if you think about it, takes varied forms if you make it a physical activity. But at the mental state, it is one of these qualities. If you think about it, interest or trust or faith or acceptance or gratitude or surrender. But at the core of all this is that word love. And that is where, even referring to Swami's earlier word, I think that pure love is something we seek to achieve in our lifetime. I'll quickly play a video here. It's an interesting conversation there. This is in Kodaikanal. Swami, the question is, how do we reach God? And Swami's answer actually is very simple, right? Like he's like, in the end, you finish your food, you come rushing here. Some people sit at the back. Some people sit right in the front. Because the desire to be closer to God, I think this is Swami says it's a very physical example of, sitting close to Swami. But I think it truly signifies what we go through in life. I think it is very important that we immerse ourselves in activities which take us closer to God. And the only way that happens is the desire for that inner interest Swami talks about should be there. And that love for God should be there. It will automatically force you to be closer to him. That is why we need to immerse ourselves in activities which are truly of divine nature and which take us closer to him. That is the reason we do bhajans. That's the reason we do study circles. That's the reason we do all these different things. But at the same time, let's not get defocused from the reason we do it. The only reason we do it is to get closer to him, to make something out of our life, because actively we have chosen a spiritual, spiritual side to our own lives. A quick quote again from Swami. This is again, where the connection to Swami, he says, is through love. But at the same time, the value of love, Swami brings out in this quote. Even a boulder will, through the action of sun, rain, heat, and cold, disintegrate into mud and become food for a tree. Spiritual efforts must transmute your attitude towards beings and things. Remember, even the hardest of hearts can be softened, and divine will sprout therein, so do not give up. The point is, again, all this sadhana should manifest itself as pure love in us, love towards all beings and love towards God. Again, just a couple of quick thoughts here in the next 5 minutes or so. Again, different facets of this word devotion. So I just wanted to bring the concept of surrender here as well. This word surrender has been misinterpreted, and people promote idleness in the name of surrender. We think that our mind, thought, and body have been surrendered to the Lord. This, in fact, is not true and is in the direction of deceiving the Lord. We are undertaking to cheat the Lord. Your mind is not under your own control, and under such circumstances, how can you hold it and give it to the Lord? You have no control over your own body. If you have a small cut, blood oozes from your body, and you run to the doctor asking for a bandage. If this is your body and if you have complete control over it, why is that you're not able to control the outflow of the blood? In this context, to say that you have surrendered your mind and body to the Lord is a statement which is untrue. This word surrender conveys that there is someone who gives and someone who accepts, and that you are surrendering to someone. There is a feeling of duality implied in this word surrender. A man with a dual mind is half blind. In this manner, while he remains with his dual thought, how can he recognize the non-dual aspect? The true meaning of surrender is recognition of the fact that in everyone and in everywhere, God is present. The recognition of the presence of God in all jivas is the true meaning of the word surrender. Again, Swami's way of illustrating, saying, don't just say it in words, exhibit it in, in the feeling. Another aspect or facet of this word devotion, right? So gratitude is another important piece. All right, I just wanted to place a few different ideas. I also wanted to place this this description of who is an ideal Sai devotee. I have been reading about this in the last few actually months now, and quite fascinated in terms of Swami has his own definition of the word a Sai devotee, because we use that word quite loosely, right, sometimes, but there is so much depth to what his expectation of a Sai devotee is. And Swami has given a beautiful poem in Telugu. It's translated here in English in a bulleted form. This is, as early as 1964 is when Swami spoke about this. Swami says, the one who always has the name of God on his tongue, for whom the search for truth is their daily activity. Love is truly their form, having purity in thought rather than external finery. Look upon every object in creation as the form of divinity. Be engaged in activities that are holy and helpful to others. Do right and speak right. Practice what you preach, that's deeds follow precept. Perform good deeds, good conduct, and have good words. It's important, again, for us to always look back at, Swami's expectations for each of us the moment we are on this path. And, this clearly captures the high level of, expectation. And, even if you take it bullet point by bullet point, being consistent in this is what will make us truly, Swami will be able to call us as his devotees then. I'll actually close with, one particular story. Again, a story which is, I think of very often, and I may have narrated it in, my previous talks, but I'll bring it up here again because I just want it to give us perspective. Because in the end, this devotion is nothing but keeping that connection with Swami eternally. And in the end, it is pining for him alone, and in the juggle of the worldly and the mundane and all the different things we go through, keeping our eye completely focused on him alone. On that note, there is the story of one time Swami was driving back from Whitefield to Prashanti Nilayam, and he was in his car, and there was just the driver in the front, and Swami was sitting at the back, and the car was going. And as you know, the terrain is pretty hilly, and plenty of animals, and it's pretty arid. It's very hot, and snakes are something which very often we see in Puttaparthi quite often. So that particular time when the driver was going on the road, and they were very close to Puttaparthi, and what had happened was he saw a snake which was crossing the road, a hilly terrain, and the driver immediately is not sure what he want. He saw the snake already, but not enough time to brake. But at the same time, Swami, he looks behind, because if he brakes, he didn't want to disturb Swami. And it appeared Swami had his eyes closed, so he didn't want to disturb Swami as well. So as he was, it's not too much. And I always think in life, this is always the situation. We in a split second, we have to make a decision. So he has to decide between braking and not braking. And he decides, I don't want to disturb Swami. I should just go forward. So he just moves forward and continues the journey. But in his heart of hearts, he's very sad, because he feels he must have run over the animal and, the reptile in this case. And he just felt very, very bad. Having known, he's like, I could have avoided it, but that's what happened. Anyway, he kept it to himself. He went back. They reached Puttaparthi. And once they reached Puttaparthi, Swami calls for him, and he goes, and Swami knows in his mind, I'm sure he's going through something. So Swami asks him what happened, and he doesn't say anything, right? So he doesn't say anything. And then Swami immediately says, he smiles and he says, don't worry, the snake is safe. Now, this is something he didn't even tell Swami or anything like that. But, Swami, the moment, he just immediately not only shows, obviously, his knowledge of everything, past, present, and future, but at the same time, I think it shows a few different things. And I always think through this incident in many different ways. And, a couple of them. One is obviously Swami's love for all creation. So, in this case, obviously, Swami said, the snake is safe, don't worry about it. But the second thing is, I think there is further detail in this. Swami's also shows him his back, and there is the tire marks on top of him. And basically the snake, Swami said, I took the stress of the whole thing, and then the snake went away fine. But the second thing I think about is in life, like I was saying, these kinds of split-second decisions, anything we do at work, in the home, or anywhere else, it's very often, all the, good books we read, all the good, life applications we try to follow. In the end, it needs to come to use in those kinds of split-second, right? In those kinds of moments. And in this case, the driver, he could have chosen to brake. But at the same time, he decided that if I choose Swami, he will take care of everything else. And that is a great lesson, which I always think through. In life, it is always important to think through actions and think about whether these are actions Swami would approve, not approve. Choosing this kind of an action, would it make Swami happy? Right? When we choose in that direction and we think through with him, putting him as, the person who will make that determination for us, we invariably end up choosing right? The moment we put the burden on Swami and make a decision, invariably we'll end up choosing right. And that becomes a beautiful lesson. And often enough, I've shared this many times, but I still think about it every time when, I share this story, because it's a reminder for my own mind that, when put in difficult circumstances, always think, would Swami approve this action? Would he be pleased by me choosing such a path, such a direction? So with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Hopefully, I was able to share a few different ideas in terms of this relationship to him through devotion, which manifests in very many different forms in our daily life. And at the same time, Swami's own expectation, which is up here on this slide, in terms of what he wants us to be as, when he thinks of us as his devotees. I'll conclude with that. Sairam, thank you so much for this opportunity to share this evening.